Hello. This is Robert here, and I'm going to talk to you about some issues regarding learning languages in Africa. It's something that I have some experience in, and something I've studied a bit, and I just wanted to share with you maybe some of the common misconceptions or common mistakes that someone, especially coming from like a European background or an American background, that English speakers can make when learning African language. Probably the first thing that's important to know is that when you learn your first language, that a grammar actually develops inside of your head. And so when you're learning your English grammar from a very young age, this begins to build, and it builds in a pretty complex model, which gives you the ability, like what I'm doing right now, it gives you the ability to speak fluidly, to be able to speak really without thinking about it, and the words come out in the right order, and you put the S's and the EDs in their regular forms where they need to be made, and rarely do you ever make a mistake. It's something that's very, very natural. It becomes an automated process because what you're doing when you're speaking your first language is you are simply running your thoughts through a multi-level algorithm that produces speech. It's a pretty fascinating thing. When you're learning your second language, it actually goes through a similar process. It just takes time and awareness to be able to build those same structures so that your thoughts, what you're wanting to say to somebody else, that it comes out in the right order, the right form, with the right intonation. And I know it's a lot more complex than that, but maybe you could just start thinking about it like that. So your initial state grammar for whatever language you're learning after your first language is the grammar of your first language, and this is pretty interesting. So what you do is you take the grammar structure of your first language and it duplicates. And when that duplicates, then you begin to make adjustments. But the adjustments that you make is the adjustments to the internal grammar of your first language copy. And then that copy or that duplicate is rehearsed, it is reformed, and eventually it produces what you would say a native-like grammar. It is totally possible to arrive at an extremely high level of proficiency, even learning a language as an adult. It simply takes time and pressure, right? It's like making a diamond. It's the same type of thing. It's not easy. If it were easy, we'd all have diamonds, but we do not. So it's a difficult process. So the grammar that you have inside of your head for English is only like a slice of potential ways that a language could be structured. So, if you say that there's like a great big piece of pie of all the options that a language could use to show, to be able to show the tense of a verb, to be able to show who's speaking and who's speaking to be able to show intensity, or to be able to show how things would work in the future or how things would work in the past. If you could imagine that whole process, every option that's out there is a great big piece of pie, then English or French or German or Swahili, any one language is only taking a sliver of that pie and making use of all of the options that could be used for showing how thoughts are organized and how you represent reality with the language that you speak. So we'll talk about really just two of those aspects, or well, yeah, we'll get to aspect, two of those features, right? But keep in mind that if you take all of the languages that have existed, thousands of languages that have existed, and if you laid them all on top of each other, that you would find literally hundreds, thousands of ways to show verb inflection, to be able to show noun declension. I can't even imagine how many different ways of showing prepositions that there would be. So If we just look at verbs, we'll talk about the difference between tense and aspect, and I want you to know that these really interact a lot. So if you grew up speaking a language like English that's very tense heavy, and when you think about tense, I want you to think about time. Tense is really only concerned with time, past, present, and future. So if you grew up speaking English, you're going to be looking to put your verbs, looking to put your actions in the past, or in the present, or in the future. Okay? So there's also this other way that you can mark a verb to be able to show how the verb is organized and how it fits within a story. And that's a grammatical feature called aspect. So whereas tense is concerned with time, aspect is concerned with process and result. So I could do, a little past tense here. So I could do some, I ran, let's say, yesterday I ran to the market. Okay. That's past tense, but I could also change the aspect of the verb. I could say yesterday I was running to the market. So that's just the difference between a perfect and an imperfect verb. So there we're talking about aspect, but both of those would be in past tense. Now, what's the difference between I ran and I was running? Well, I ran only looks at the action. It only situates the action in the past as a complete whole. It does not give any, it does not give any information about the process, duration, or the result, right? But if I said I was running, we get a little bit more information in our story. We know that there was a process to it, and when that observation took place, or when the part of the story that I am telling, when that takes place, that I am in the process of running. So it shows duration, it shows an action that is incomplete, and it also shows that it's an ongoing process. So think about it. So tense is time, and aspect is process and result. Now, when you get to Africa, the languages there are going to be yes. So in Africa, the languages there are primarily aspect oriented languages. So what does that mean? It means that you are not always going to have verbs situated in the past, in the present, or the future. In a clear-cut way. They're going to be understood to be past, present, or future. Sure, but that's normally going to come from more nuanced parts of the language. But what you will often get is aspects of the verb. So that is going to be the process and the result of the verb. And it may not necessarily be marked. Okay, the verb itself may not mark itself for actual time. To situate it in the past, to situate it in the present, or to situate the verb in the future. You may not get that. Sure, it's a little bit of a disadvantage. Somebody speaks, say English, Spanish, French, because they are wanting to press the new language into the old form. But remember, that's not what we're doing. We are allowing the pressure of the new language to bear down on our new initial state grammar and to make the little adjustments for how a verb is marked and how a noun is used and how prepositions operate and how tense and aspect might be shown on different verbs. And as we allow that pressure, as we're learning it intentionally, and as we're passively hearing the language, then those changes are made to this initial state grammar. And as the process continues, that initial state grammar will eventually become a highly developed native-like grammar, which is what we're going for. So just keeping aware that one part of grammar is that in the language that you're working in, you want to be aware that the verbs are most likely concerned with process and result. And they may leave out a distinct mark of past or present or future. And languages can do time all different ways. There can be distant futures and distant past. And you would need to look for these things and just simply to be aware of them. But like we said before, if English is simply using a slice of all grammatical potentialities, or German's using a slice of all grammatical potentialities, then any one language is really going to be an anomaly. It is going to be something that is going to be unique and may not necessarily be as similar as we would like our languages to be to our first languages to be to the language that we are learning next, whatever that might be. But it's a wonderful thing. I believe that it is totally God ordained. I think that this is a sanctifying process. I think it is a purifying process for the gospel and for the church. I think it is all built into God's sovereign design. I got my own ideas on that as well. But what you're doing in simply learning a language, it is really reforming not only your worldview and how you see the world, but it is reforming how the world sees you. You are actually changing. You are becoming a different person. And as you respond positively through this difficult and stressful series of events, many years of learning a language, then you are becoming something different. And you are indeed becoming something that is more and more like Christ. Yeah. So the last thing that I'll say is what I want you to do is try to nail down 10 to 15 verbs. Okay. Now these are going to be verbs that you are going to learn very, very well, and you are going to learn them in forms that you will use every day. So it could be verbs in phrases like, I will come to your house tomorrow. I cleaned my house yesterday. The weather is very hot today, but yesterday the weather was even hotter. And tomorrow, hopefully, it will be cooler. So you need to find just a series of these short verbs, and you need to understand how these individual verbs work in different forms. So you're going to need to place those in different times. You're going to need to place each verb in different scenarios, and then see if you can pick up on some of the difference. If you're talking about something that happens yesterday, how does that work? If you're talking about something that happens tomorrow, how does that individual verb change? And then you're going to be picking up on tense forms. And then you may be able to see how it's marked for aspect. You may say, you may have a phrase like, I washed myself, and that may be different than if you washed the truck, or if an action is completed. It could be something like, the wind is blowing, or the wind blew the tree down. So you're going to need to find out actions that are completed, actions that are incomplete. You maybe even find processes that are never completed, and how do you talk about those? And then once you get these 10 or 15, and it's going to take some work, and this is just part of a much bigger plan. And then these 10 or 15, they can really kind of serve as a base. So if you're working in a language that has not had much written on it, then you're going to be pretty much on your own, and you're going to be building this grammar very, very intentionally. But something that you need to make sure that you're doing is you're able to describe less than what you're actually able to do. Now that seems backwards from your high school Spanish class. So in your high school Spanish class, you could describe a lot about verbs and about sentences and how things fit together, even if you could not speak Spanish. But in learning a living language within that speech community, it's the exact opposite. You're going to have a lot more that you can produce compared to what you can describe. But I want you to keep describing things. And at times, you may take the effort to describe something on a page. You may be, writing something down and discussing this with a language helper or something like that, to where you're able to find 10 to 15 verbs that you can use in various forms. Right? Don't start with 10 to 15. Start with 3, right? So start with 3 and then situate those 3 verbs in different settings. And those 3 verbs are verbs that you will use every day, and then add a 4th and a 5th and a 6th until you have 10 or 15 that you can talk about yesterday, today, tomorrow. You can talk about that same verb in an ongoing process, in a process that's completed. You can talk about that verb as into different into different maybe social positions. So like how you speak to your children could be different to how you speak to a neighbor. And also do this. Is that verb constructed differently if you speak to God, or if you pray, or if the spirits are communicating something to somebody else? Because you may find that it could actually be marked for, verbs could be constructed different based off of maybe the social status, or also even like the animate, inanimate, spirit, physical body distinction. So you could find that too, and you could discover this, and it could be very, very helpful, very motivating. But keep in mind, obviously in English, we're not, we don't even have those types of categories. But in some languages, they certainly do. So it really can be a lot of fun. So start small, and work your way up to where you've got 10 or 15, and those 10 or 15 can create a base to where your ear begins to hear, your brain begins to understand, oh, okay, this is all of the forthcoming events are constructed something like this. I, have this vowel on the end of it. But then it's different if these same events are events that have not yet taken place. Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's interesting. Now, if they have taken place, and there may be a difference in the way that verb or that action is described based off of the process. Okay. And remember, process, result, talking about aspect, time, primarily talking about tense. There's a lot more to it. Maybe we can do some more videos. Feel free to let me know if there's anything else that you need, if I can help to troubleshoot some stuff, or if you just want to discuss some things about the language. I think languages are fascinating, and I'll tell you why. I think that they are all unique ways that we can know and understand who God is. I think that every language is a unique representation of reality. That is absolutely fascinating. That's why it's a tragic loss whenever a language is lost. I think that whenever a language dies, I think that as a species we lose access to how reality is perceived within that pie slice. So we are none the richer for losing any language. And keep in mind, we probably had like 10,000 languages, and now we're down to like maybe 6,200, 500, something like that, distinct languages. So all that's happening, and you are part of the process of keeping a language alive, keeping it moving, and keeping it redemptive. Because God, He loves these people, He loves this language, and He is built into the culture and the language. He's built into every language and into every culture unique ways of knowing who God is and understanding not only the person of God, but understanding the world that He created. So maybe that's a little bit much for now, because I know you're just trying to work on 3 verbs. But that is all a step in this great big process of knowing God. And as we know who God is, then we can know more about His world and know more about who we are. All right. Thank you for listening, and let me know if I can help.